Scream movie recaps. Casey Becker's a high school student. She's selling it for the night. She's about to watch a horror movie, and she's popping popcorn when she gets a phone call from some random guy who just comes in and F's it all up for her. It starts off all flirty, and they're talking about horror movies, but then he reveals himself to be some kind of creeper that's been watching Casey, and he forces her to play this game where she has to answer questions about horror movies correctly, or her boyfriend Steve, who is bound and gagged out on the patio by whoever this is, he's gonna die if she doesn't answer them right.
She answers a Friday the 13th question wrong, and Steve is unalived right in front of her.
So she tries to hide, she tries to get away, but she's caught and she's unalived by this killer who's wearing a ghost face, mask, and costume. Her parents come home and they're hearing some of this. They try looking for her, and when they finally find her, she's hanging from a tree with her insides on the outside. The next day, there are all kinds of reporters outside the school. The police are questioning people, and everyone's talking about Casey and Steve's unalivings. Among them is Sydney Prescott, our main character, her boyfriend Billy, her best friend Tatum, Tatum's boyfriend Stu, and their friend Randy. Sydney's having a really tough time with all this because it's also the first year anniversary of her mother's essay in unaliving, and it doesn't help that Gail Weathers, a news reporter, is hanging around covering all of this. Sydney can't stand her because Gail wrote this book about the crime about her mother's unaliving, and she maintains that Cotton Weary, the guy who was actually in prison for Sydney's mom, Maureen Prescott's unaliving, was having an affair with her and is actually innocent. While waiting for Tatum to pick her up that evening because Sid's dad's on a business trip, she gets a phone call from Ghostface, and he comes for her. But just as he runs off, Billy, her boyfriend, shows up, and while comforting Sydney, his cell phone falls out of his pocket. Police show up and they take him into custody. But while he's at the station, Sydney gets another Ghostface call while she's staying at Tatum's. Billy ends up being released, and now Sydney's dad, Neil Prescott, is a main suspect as the Ghostface phone calls have been traced back to his phone. School's canceled and a curfew is set in place because of everything that's going on. While everyone's all happy and leaving school, Principal Hembry gets unalived by Ghostface in his own office. Stu throws a party to celebrate being out of school. Gail, who's been flirting with Dewey, Tatum's adorable police officer brother on duty, shows up with him. While everyone's partying and Randy's explaining the rules that you must follow to survive a horror movie, Tatum goes to the garage alone to go get some drinks and is cornered by Ghostface, who unalives her by crushing her with a garage door when she tries to crawl through the doggy door to get away from him. Word gets out that Principal Hembry's body is at the football field, and the party guests run out to go see, leaving Sydney and Billy, who are in a bedroom, Stu, Randy, and Gail's cameraman, Kenny, who's watching from camera monitors in the news van, they're at the house. After Sydney supposedly disqualifies herself as a final girl by giving it up to Billy, they're confronted by Ghostface, who stabs him. Sydney runs out of the house and she tries to get help from Kenny, the cameraman, but he's unalived by Ghostface. Gail, who had been out patrolling with Dewey earlier, crashes her van while trying to escape, and Dewey is stabbed in the back while investigating in the house. Sydney takes his weapon for protection. Randy and Stu show up and they both accuse each other of being the killer. Sydney's like, screw you both. She goes back into the house and she finds a wounded Billy. They let Randy inside. Sydney gives Billy the weapon and he uses it on Randy, revealing himself to be Ghostface. His wound and the blood were fake. Stu's in cahoots with Billy. He's got a voice changer and all. They trap Sydney and tell her all about their plan to unalive her and blame it on her dad, whom they have taken hostage. Then it all comes out. Billy tells Sydney that he and Stu were the ones who unalived her mother because she broke up his family home by having an affair with Billy's dad and flashing her shit all over town like she's Sharon Stone. While Gail intervenes and Billy knocks her out, Sydney escapes. She puts on the Ghostface costume and she taunts him with a phone call. After all this, Sydney gets Billy with an umbrella and she unalives Stu by dropping a TV on his head. Billy comes back and attacks Sydney, but Gail pew-pews him, knocking him out. Randy, although hurt, is okay, and he warns them that the unaliver always comes back for a final scare. Billy does that and Sydney finally takes him out for good. Police arrive. Dewey is badly hurt, but he's still alive and he's being taken into an ambulance while Gail makes a news report about the events of that night.